Life Inside the Jungle, the new play featuring migrants telling their real-life stories of surviving in one of Europe's most notorious refugee camps. I'm Shuri Ghosh, and this is Insight. Hello and welcome to the programme. For more than a decade, thousands of migrants headed across Europe to the port of Calais in northern France, desperate to get across the Channel into England. They set up home in a controversial camp which became known as the Jungle. It became the focus of global attention during the peak of the migration crisis in 2015 and was eventually shut down by the French authorities. Now, a new play is touring Europe, featuring people who lived in the camp, Syrians, Afghans and others, working alongside actors to tell their real-life stories. Insight's Sarah Firth went to meet the cast in London.
We've all read the headlines, heard the debates and seen the pictures of the refugee camp in France's Calais, dubbed the Jungle. But now one theatre company's trying to tell the story in a way you probably won't have heard before.
All the way from Afghanistan.
The cast of this play, called Borderline, is made up of European actors and refugees who actually lived in the Calais camp.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you're hoping this play will achieve?
So I started to go to Calais Jungle actually in August 2015 as volunteer. Really, I started to do cooking in the kitchen, sorting out donations in the warehouse, just because I'm French and living in the UK, and I felt I wanted to do something about that. Like, I was really touched by the situation there. I run a theatre company called Psyche Delight, and I'm also a psychotherapist myself. I always do social theatre. Basically, I try to address something that I think needs to be addressed in the society and raise awareness about that. I decided I wanted to do a show with refugees, but also with European performers. I didn't want to isolate refugees and do something only with refugees. I wanted to show that integration was possible and that we could do great things together.
So the play is a satire, but that idea isn't something that seems to fit very naturally with what happened in the Calais Jungle. How did that come about?
I decided I wanted to do a comedy, I guess to give the opportunity to show a different image of people, something that would be positive rather than another tragedy, another scary image. And comedy, of course, allows to reach that as well. I mean, it's only on the other side of tragedy. So from a comedy perspective, but to show how shameful we should be about how we treated the situation and the people there, you know.
So I want to start with asking you about what it's like to be involved in this play, what it means to you all individually, and how you found it.
This show, during that show, when we're doing like rehearsal or we're doing the real show, that's about our real life. And so I think we are doing our best because it's about our experience, and it makes us like feel freedom, and we are feeling very good. And because we are, so during the show when we're doing, we can see the face of the people, and that makes us more than happy when we see people laughing and they're trying to know about our experience. Our life there was like animals. So we didn't have any future. We didn't have any, anything. So on that time, when you are feeling too much pressure on your mind, on your real life, because you have to go somewhere and you have to try every night, every hour, and every day with food problems or like weather problems, with everything. And The other way, there was the police, France police, with the tear gas, with the pepper spray. So there was many problems. If I talk about the problems in there and our bad experience there, it takes maybe days.
And I remember when I arrived to the jungle, I was really shocked because that camp is the last thing you can imagine you're going to see in France in 2015. And it opened my mind and it shaped my character in different ways. So I learned, and it made me appreciate myself as a human more, honestly. And to see how when European government talking about humanity and human rights, it's just lies. It's on the ground. It's not exist, because when you see what's happening in Calais, there is nothing called human rights.
Can I ask you all, but starting with you, Barrett, what do you want people who are coming to see the play to take away from it? What message are you hoping they'll hear in this play?
The most important thing, what I want the people to take with them, is to start thinking how they could be helpful, what they can do. Because honestly, a lot of people donating money and volunteering, but is this what we really want? Is it changing? I think the situation in Calais was going worse and worse, and it's been demolished. But it's really important to the people to understand that the only way to take down all the walls of fear and suspicion is to start talking, understanding each other as refugees and Europeans, because we need to build bridges, not walls.
I'm joined now by Corinne Squire and Aura Lunasma, who've studied the camp in Calais and written a book about life there called Voices from the Jungle. And this is it, not connected to the play, we have to say, but full of first-hand accounts about the experience of people living in that notorious camp. Corinne, it must have been quite heartbreaking, some of the stories that we hear. I've just read an account from one man from Iran who said it's better when he's asleep, because when he wakes up, reality is so hard.
Yes, I think that's true. It was an incredibly difficult environment for most people. This was written by 22 people from the camp who were part of a university course that we taught there. But for many, the real motivation for doing that course was that they would get the opportunity to write so that people would hear what they'd been through, what they had to say, what the camp was like, in fact, you know, that they had come to Europe explicitly looking for freedom and democracy, because they were on the run from terrorism and dictatorship, and this was what they had found.
And conditions at the camp were pretty bad, weren't they?
Yeah, the conditions of the camp were horrendous, but I do think that we need to, for me, I mean, we travelled back and forth over a year teaching this course, and you know, the conditions of the camp was something that always came up when we were having these conversations with people, and I think something that, sure, the conditions were horrendous, but what was worse was the treatment in general by the police, by the authorities, by both French and the UK authorities, in terms of ignoring the plight of people who had come to Europe for safety.
Let's just clarify, you were teaching a course in the camp. This was a university course that refugees could embark on.
Exactly.
That's right. And obviously they must have gained a lot out of that. But you were talking about the conditions in the camp and security. Let's not forget that this camp was viewed as a big problem in northern France, and that is why the authorities eventually shut it down.
That's true. It was viewed as a big problem, and it was indeed a difficult thing for people in Calais to have to deal with. You know, it was the last border for the people that had arrived there. But I think it was symptomatic, really, and of course it became part of French politics in the run-up to even the elections recently. You know, it was part of the campaign that the Front National ran, you know, so it had a number of different political significances. And there's no Calais camp there now, but there are still people living in ditches and under bushes in the Calais area. And you could say that after Calais has moved to other places. There are still really difficult conditions where people are living similarly in, for instance, Paris and other towns in northern France and Belgium.
Do you think that the issue of migration and refugees, people trying to get across into Europe, that we dehumanise it sometimes, because people talk about, oh, economic refugees, they're coming for a better life, and okay, some of them are coming from war-torn countries. But do you think that we try and tell ourselves a different story to make it easy to accept all these people trying to cross into Europe?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's been happening through some of the news coverage of the so-called refugee crisis. I mean, we should be asking a crisis for whom? I mean, we're seeing this as a crisis for Europe, but actually this is a crisis for those millions of people who are fleeing war-torn regions. And I think this is one of the things that we saw very quickly when we were meeting people who were in Calais. This kind of dehumanizing gaze that they received from the media very often. There was a lot of mistrust between the residents and the media, and as Corinne has pointed out, that was one of the driving forces for people to come to us and say, well, we want to tell our stories, because this is not the way our stories have been taken from us and told by others is not really giving us a chance to appear human.
Was it a rewarding project to do? I
think we learned a great deal. You know, good educational projects hopefully are always like that the teachers learn as much as the students. So yes, it was very, very rewarding. It was also rewarding not just in the educational sense, but to see how people in Calais, despite their horrendous conditions, were building what they could in that situation. Many of the refugees were the people who built the schools, who built the distribution centres, who built and ran the restaurants, the youth centre. All that was very largely refugee-led. Because if you think about the people as humans who were there, very often they were people who had organised against oppressive governments. They were people with strong political and organisational histories. And when they arrived there, they tried to do something to improve things, to make things okay for everybody.
And what did you take away from it?
Definitely that the same that Corinne has just referred to, that community of humans that we met in Calais. And that's why I'm sometimes reluctant to talk about the horrific conditions, because actually what I really came away with was meeting humans who were just trying their best to strive and help each other in difficult circumstances. And what I also came away with from the whole project was the inadequacy of any response that we as individuals could take in a situation where governments were not taking the responsibility.
It makes for a very interesting reading. Thank you very much indeed for joining me to talk about it. Corinne Squire and Aura Lunasma, thank you. You're watching Insight. Coming up, we'll be finding out about the wider issue of the refugee crisis across Europe. Stay with us.